Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first webinar in the monthly Clean webinar series. I am Priyadarshini Karve. I am the CEO of Clean Energy Access Network and also one of the founder members. Clean is an industry organization of practitioners working in the field of decentralized renewable energy across India. Our topic today is actually quite appropriate to kickstart this monthly series. We are going to talk about DRECs, which is Distributed Renewable Energy Certificates. It's an internationally accepted instrument for financing distributed renewable energy projects. Our partners in this webinar are Power Trust and South Pole. Power Trust enables corporate investments in distributed energy systems, and South Pole is focused on developing and financing projects that reduce carbon emissions, protect biodiversity, and also deliver real benefits to local communities. Today, our panelists are Girish Narang, Paul Birkello and Sonali Vora. Girish will be moderating the panel. Before I hand over to Girish, just a few announcements, instructions for the audience. Please introduce yourselves in the chat, and you can put your comments in chat, but please put your questions in the Q&A box. I hope all of you can access both of these boxes. Let's start. Girish, please take over.
Thank you, Priyadarshini. Thank you very much. And hello to all the participants here. It's been a while. We have been planning to set up this call, but for some reason or other it got delayed. But finally we are here. In fact, we are already engaged with some of the members of Clean Network already, but we thought that it would be right to reach out to a lot of members, the other members of Clean Network, so that whatever the benefit or the accessibility to the DREC instrument can be provided should be known to all the members here. So to that respect, we will start with what about the concept of DREC, which Paul shall be explaining. Then Sonali shall be introducing a bit about South Pole, and I shall give a detail about Power Trust. And at the end, we can keep the floor open for question and answers. So we will do that way. And I'm sharing the presentation, and Paul, you can start there.
Thank you very much, Girish. Just real quick, while Girish is pulling that up, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. So I run operations at Power Trust. We're a Canadian company that co-led the DREC initiative along with our partners at South Pole for the last several years. I'm based near Seattle, Washington in the United States, actually. Girish, my colleague, is based in New Delhi and leads our Southeast Asia sourcing operations. I focus most of my time in Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa because we operate around the world, as well as leading a lot of our work with the DREC initiative. So happy to tell you more about that today. So today we're talking about the DREC initiative. Concept of RECs, or Renewable Energy Certificates, is probably familiar to many of you, but we want to make sure everybody's on a level playing field. So we'll start with a bit of a background about the Renewable Energy Certificate market and why we thought a new instrument would be useful. Like I mentioned, this is a partnership between South Pole and Power Trust. The DREC initiative is a nonprofit multi-stakeholder initiative that involves many players across the distributed renewable energy landscape, including the Clean Network. We're supported by organizations such as the Shell Foundation, Sustainable Energy for All, USAID, GIZ, UK. And we've been working on this for the last just over 2 years now. We launched the first commercial transactions with DRECs about a year ago. So if you want to go to the next slide. So when we're talking about climate finance, we're really talking about some of the largest companies in the world taking actions to reduce or offset their emissions in their operations globally. They're getting a lot of pressure from a lot of different angles to do this. And you're seeing some of the most forward-thinking of these companies starting to make very ambitious public pledges, such as joining the Science Based Targets Initiative, where they've committed to robust targets to reduce their emissions globally. There are about 4,000 companies there. There are about 400 companies that have joined the RE100 group who have committed to power 100% of their operations around the globe from renewable energy. And of course, these companies are also getting pressure from their investors and from groups such as the net zero asset managers. So there's a lot of momentum that's been growing for the last 10, 15 years, but especially within the last few years within the renewable energy landscape amongst companies who are making voluntary procurements of renewable energy, especially amongst those members of the RE100. So next slide, please. Like I said, this may be familiar to many of you, but we wanted to set a level playing field. So when these companies set these targets or make these public pledges, they'll start by measuring their footprint around the world. And that means understanding where their emissions lie across scope 1, which is their direct operations, their scope 2 emissions, which come from the energy that they consume in their direct operations, and scope 3, which represents their supply chain. Once they understand where those emissions are coming from, they're going to create targets and a roadmap to get there. Because we're talking about renewable energy today, we're really talking about scope 2, but because most companies' scope 3 emissions, the largest portion of that is going to come from the energy use of their suppliers. Renewable energy certificates and renewable energy initiatives in general can play a strong role in both scope 2 and scope 3. So once these companies have decided to reduce their scope 2 and scope 3 emissions, they're going to look for ways to do that. And within the energy space, there are a couple different options that are available to them. Typically, their first choice is going to be looking at building on site. If they can put solar panels on their own factory rooftops or office buildings, there are going to be many cases where they can't do that, and that's rarely going to solve their entire footprint or reduce their entire footprint. And so their next best option is often to look to do a PPA, a long-term power purchase agreement, where they're buying both the power directly as well as the clean energy attributes of that power. There are a lot of markets where that's not possible, either because the regulations don't exist to support that. They don't allow for bilateral transactions, or for various reasons, PPA is not suitable to what the corporation is trying to achieve. For example, in scope 3 emissions, where if you're looking across the supply chain, it's very difficult for one corporation to sign a PPA that supports many different suppliers across many different countries, for example. And so if they can't sign a PPA or build on site, they're going to look for certificates that are unbundled, meaning that they're sold separately from the energy. The generic term for this is EAC, or an energy attribute certificate. There are various types of EACs. Renewable Energy Certificate, or REC, is one of them. There's also the IREC standard, the International REC standard. In Europe, they're often called guarantees of origin, REGOs, various acronyms that you'll encounter. We're going to talk about all of them generically as RECs, Renewable Energy Certificates. And again, this may be old hat for many of you, but for anyone who's new to the Renewable Energy Certificate landscape, I want to start with a primer. The reason renewable energy certificates exist has to do with this fact that if energy is flowing onto a grid, there's no way to track where those electrons came from. If you have both fossil fuel generation and renewable resources like solar panels or hydro plants, et cetera, feeding electricity into the same set of wires, once those electrons go on the wires, you can't tell who's consumed which. The analogy I like to use, it's if you had 2 glasses of water, one of them is red and one of them is blue, and you poured them both into a river, and then you tried to scoop out just the water molecules from the red glass downstream. It would be impossible. There's no way to do that without using a certificate. And so renewable energy certificates came about maybe 20, 30 years ago in response to renewable purchase obligations or regulations that countries started to put in place, requiring certain heavy emitters or state utilities to purchase a certain portion of their electricity from renewable resources. And in order to do that, you have to buy a certificate. So if I consume 100 megawatt hours of electricity and I want to say that it all came from the solar plant that's connected to my grid and not from the coal plant that's on the same grid, then I have to buy 100 certificates to match those 100 megawatt hours. One REC is equal to 1 megawatt hour. About 10 or so years ago, 15 years ago, companies started to get into this game as well, realizing that they could use the same instrument that came about through the compliance markets as a way to reduce their own footprint. And you started to see corporations making voluntary purchases of renewable energy certificates. Next slide, please. Now, before we go any further, I want to address something that we get questions about very often, which is what's the difference between a carbon offset and a REC, whether you're talking about an IREC, a DREC, a REGO, any number of acronyms, because they're related concepts, but they are fundamentally different, which matters because they're sold for different prices and have very different complexities involved in executing a transaction. So carbon offset is measuring 1 ton of carbon emissions avoided, CO2 equivalent. Renewable energy certificate is measuring energy that was generated, so megawatt hours of electricity. So what you're measuring is different, and that's the key difference is that if you're going to measure tons of CO2 that you avoided, you have to start with a baseline study, right? You have to understand what fuel sources you're displacing if you're talking about a carbon credit that's created from a renewable resource. So is it displacing coal? That's going to have some amount, tons of CO2 avoided. If it's displacing diesel, it'll have a different amount. If it's displacing a hydro plant, because you're plugged in, displacing consumption from a grid that's already somewhat renewable, it might have 0 impact on carbon emissions, right? Whereas with the REC, you're measuring megawatt hours generated. You get that data directly from the inverter. We know for a fact that it happens. So it's a much simpler instrument in that way when it comes to the measurement. In terms of the emissions that are being reduced, carbon offset can be used to address direct emissions in a company's scope 1, or as well as scope 3 if they're bought on behalf of a supply chain partner. Renewable energy certificates can only be used to address emissions coming from energy consumption. So that means scope 2, or if you're using it for a supplier's consumption, you can use it for scope 3 as well. The types of projects that are eligible for carbon offsets versus RECs are different. Carbon offsets can apply to any sort of forestry project, biofuels, et cetera. Renewable energy does apply as well, although you have to do that conversion from megawatt hours to tons of CO2 based on the fuel you're displacing. Whereas RECs only apply to renewable energy resources. That could be solar, wind, hydro. With the DREC initiative, we're currently only working with solar. We do have plans to expand that into small scale wind and hydro in the future. But as of now, and for the foreseeable future, for the next year at least, we're only working with small scale solar assets. And as I mentioned, the complexity of carbon offset is much greater due to the fact that you have to do a baseline study, which means that they can be more expensive projects to initiate. Whereas renewable energy certificates, because it's a much simpler measurement mechanism, the transaction costs tend to be low, which makes it very well suited for small scale distributed renewables. We can go on to the next slide, please. Now, the landscape of renewable energy certificates has been growing dramatically over the last several years. DRECs are part of the IREC ecosystem, the International REC Standards ecosystem. And the IREC publishes great data about how many issuances they've had over the last couple of years. It has absolutely exploded. Now, unfortunately, almost all of this is coming from utility scale projects, and that's because the system was designed to support utility scale renewables. Where the energy is being fed through a grid operator. There's a third party that verifies whether or not that generation happened. If you're talking about small scale distributed projects, there is, especially off-grid projects, there is no third party verifying whether or not that generation happened. And also the work involved in registering with the IREC ecosystem, if you're a small scale device, is often not worth it when the prices are in the $1 to $5 a megawatt hour range. And it's a lot of manual paperwork. It's done in spreadsheets, it's done in PDFs, and there has to be this third-party verifier. So that's why we saw the need for a new instrument for distributed renewable energy certificates, or DRECs, as a way to onboard small-scale distributed renewables to the IREC ecosystem. So DREC is not a new standard in and of itself. We fall under the IREC standard, and every DREC matches an IREC. In fact, at the end of the day, it becomes an IREC that is traded. We think of DRECs as an on-ramp to the IREC ecosystem for small-scale distributed renewables. There we go. And yeah, that's exactly what I just said. Our mission is to bring this new instrument to the market that will help catalyze new sources of finance for small-scale distributed renewables specifically. Next slide, please. So the way DREC works, the electricity is generated. This can be from systems as small as a Pico solar lantern. We have at PowerTrust have worked with devices as small as 0.5 kilowatt. It can include solar home systems, mini grids, factory rooftops. As long as it has a way to connect to the device and monitor the generation remotely through IoT, and then transmit that data back to a database, then we know that that generation happened. That data is submitted to the DREC platform, which is the Digital Monitoring Reporting Verification, or MRV, which is another acronym you'll hear often used, where the DREC platform will automatically validate that that generation matches what we would expect to see, given everything we know about the device that generated it, the location, the time of day and year, similar devices nearby, how they're performing, etc. So we'll run through an automated algorithm that will validate, did this generation happen? Is it within an acceptable boundary? And if it is, then it will authorize an IREC issuance request. Those IRECs then will be bought by global companies who are using them to reduce their Scope 2 emissions, or on behalf of a supply chain partner to reduce Scope 3 emissions. Next slide. And ultimately, at the heart of this process, the motivation to do it was to address these 4 challenges that many of the co-founders behind the DREC initiative experienced when they were building small-scale distributed renewables projects themselves. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the uncertain revenues that come when you're building, especially mini grids that are serving remote communities that have not had energy access before. There can be slower and uncertain uptake, or inconsistent ability to pay tariffs. So a long-term offtake agreement, typically 5 to 8 years, is what we're seeing in the market right now. For the DRECs will bring a fixed price revenue stream to these projects in hard currency. So this will be denoted in US dollars, helps to address foreign exchange risks. And the reason we're able to do this, and the reason it never happened before, is because these large companies do not have the capacity to contract with hundreds or thousands of 10 kilowatt devices around the globe. This is where market intermediaries such as PowerTrust and South Pole come into play, where we work with project developers to onboard their projects to the DREC ecosystem, aggregate those together to a scale that's meaningful to corporations that are buying hundreds of gigawatt hours a year. And of course, with this new hard currency revenue stream in hand, we're finding partners are able to take that to the bank and get access to financing that they may not have been able to before, because it improves the project economics. Next slide, please. So an example, and we're very fortunate to have Mr. Raghu here from eHands Energy to speak to his experience working with PowerTrust and DRECs, and we'll ask Raghu perhaps to say a few words. One project that we worked on with Raghu at PowerTrust is for Dr. Shroff's Charity Eye Hospital. This is a facility that in north of India that we purchased. It was just over 600 megawatt hours across 2 years of renewable energy certificates from. This is one of our very first pilot projects, a way for us to test out our systems and to tell some of the fantastic impact stories that are happening there. And we sold those megawatt hours to Netflix, one of the largest consumers of VACs in North America. So, Girish, you're handling the conversation now. Do you want Raghu to share his experience now, or say that for questions later?
Raghu, if you can just pitch in here, and not just specifically for this project, but can share your experience with DRECs, please. That would be
sure. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Girish. Hi, everybody. I am Raghu Raman, founder of eHands Energy, and also the co-founder of Clean, ever since it was incepted. And we're very fortunate to be associated with PowerTrust, and we have over 600 projects listed in PowerTrust and another 100 on the process of getting listed. And that makes us, if not the largest, one of the largest DRE companies listed on the PowerTrust platform. We have learned a lot in this process, and we have gained so much of knowledge and experience in doing this. And this has been a cutting edge deciding factor in many of the projects that we are bidding in terms of utilizing the proceedings from the environmental attributes that we have given to Power Trust for sustaining the project in terms of lowering the project cost and also making it more effective and efficient. So this particular one is a hospital. It's one of the largest hospitals in part of the country in Shahjahanpur in Mohammadi. And we have put a 240 kilowatt off-grid system. This is successfully been commissioned about a year plus back. And the proceedings of this, because this is a charity hospital and the capital cost was underwritten by another donor, which does not provide for 4-year OMC and AMCs. We were able to use the proceedings from Power Trust for sustaining this successfully. It is delivering the expected ES on target because we are able to maintain this efficiently, though it's in a very remote location. So we look forward to working with Power Trust on many such projects. We are still on the process of adding more projects to the Power Trust platform. And I'm happy to help anyone in Clean to understand this more from the user perspective. And we've been interacting with Paul and Girish and Ricky, the whole Power Trust team on a very regular basis. They've been very supportive. It's a pleasure to work with them. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Girish. Anything else you would like me to add?
No, I think that would be sufficient, Raghu. But
Yes.
thank you for sharing your experience.
Thank you very much.
So before, I will give an introduction of Power Trust, but Sonali, just checking that, would you like to present through a slide or you are just speaking?
I think a lot of people in Clean and in general are aware about South Pole's work. And Paul has given quite a thorough walkthrough of the DREC process, which is what we are doing, obviously, together as part of the platform DREC initiative. So basically, ESC is one of the many portfolios that South Pole looks at. And we are essentially carbon project developers that have, extensive expertise in the development of carbon offsetting projects. We've been in the market for international offsetting processes for like about 17 years, more than 17 years, and we have developed close to 2,000 plus projects. South Pole has been managing all the financial and operational aspects, delivering measurable impacts that are real, and providing end-to-end carbon asset management and valorization solution for all type of projects. We have been developing projects across the world in forestry, regenerative agriculture, then renewable energy, sustainable transport, and waste management. Again, we are working closely. ESCs is, of course, one of the many platforms that we are working with, IREX and DREX, but we have been working closely with voluntary standards in development of methodologies as well, such as on Vera and Gold Standard Foundation. And we have advised close to, a lot of multiple governments and development banks on the design and implementation of offsetting schemes. Again, we have also been keenly developing projects that, uses corporate renewable procurement mechanisms in DRECs to catalyze social impacts associated with distributed renewable energy capacity. And like Paul also pointed out in the conversation earlier, that we have been utilizing DRECs mostly for utility scale deployments where, applicability can vary by country. But South Pole, obviously, as is Power Trust, we are extending to certified DREs globally in a scalable manner and, encapsulate other societal benefits along with SDG 7. So that is it about South Pole and our offerings. You can reach out to me directly should you want to know more about carbon offset projects and what we're doing globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonali. If you can just provide your contact details in the chat box, so anybody who would like to they can do that. I'll be just brief introducing Power Trust. Yeah. So just to clarify to all the members, so DREC is an independent organization. It's kind of industry body which is setting the standards and process for the Distributed Renewable Energy Certificate. And Power Trust and South Pole are two of the agencies who are for-profit companies who are working on the initiative. We are working on bringing in the buyers who could be any other companies either in the RE100 group or net zero targeted companies. And then we reach out to project partners like all the members of Clean, who are our potential project partners, so that we can satisfy the demand which has been put to us by our buyers. So you can contact either of us or both of us for any of your project requirements. So you can contact South Pole or you can contact Power Trust. Sonali will also put her contact details in the chat box, and I will also do the same. So feel free to contact. Just about Power Trust, since a lot has already been covered in the earlier slides about DREC, so we are one of those agencies who are focused only on DREC. So Power Trust is a relatively new startup. We started just about a year ago, and we are focused only on the Distributed Renewable Energy Certificates. Right now, we are not providing any service other than DREC. And within that also, as Paul mentioned, we are focused right now only on solar. But as the DREC system grows and as we grow, we might cover other technologies in the time to come. What we do is that we source the project. We go reach out to developers like you, not just in India, but in all the developing countries, wherever our customers have a scope 2 or scope 3 requirement. We source the project, then we collect the data, we do the diligence, we certify those generation, use them under the IREC framework right now, because that is the framework or that is the registry we are using. And then we deliver those IRECs or certificates to our customers as per their requirements in different geographies. That is what we do. We have a strong focus on the sustainable development goals. Not just we, I would say that our customers also have a very strong focus on supporting the projects which are providing any emphasis on any of the sustainable development goals. Specifically to the members of Clean Network, we believe that most of your projects have impact other than the impact which is created by SDG 7 and 13. So many of your projects are helping education, gender equality, or a lot of other sustainable development goals. And these are the areas where our customers are also very interested. We are very interested to take those projects. And we can discuss this one-to-one, but the pricing of DRECs also is very different for the type of projects which are having an impact on sustainable development goals. So I mean, you can send your queries to us, and we can discuss that at a later stage. That is a little bit about us, that we have about more than 100 megawatt deployment, which is providing 150 plus gigawatt hour per year. Our we have already tied up with more than 100 project developers. As Raghu already mentioned, that there are a number of projects. Our smallest project right now is as small as 0.5 kilowatt, and that is the type of impact we wish to provide. We want to go to small project, so that the impact can reach to such smaller projects. That is our philosophy. The process has already been explained, but specifically to Power Trust, we first go out and sign up an agreement with our buyer, who are right now mostly based in North America or Europe. Then, according to their requirement of specific geographies and the volume, we develop the pipeline from partners like you to gather the project information. Once we do the diligence, we get the generation data. We convert the generation into certifications. That is through IREC mechanism, and then we transfer those RECs to our customer. That is the process we are adopting, and we are using that. We are using a platform approach. software-based approach to do that. So we can discuss that more in a one-to-one conversation. That is about us. Maybe we can, Rashni, I think we can make the floor open for question and answers. We already have few questions in the chat box here. Just putting that. Okay, so there are a few comments in the chat box and there are a few in the question answer, but I would first take the question. Sorry. First take the Q&A. So Dr. Dubey has mentioned, I'm interested towards soft financial inclusion. We have some projects lined up, 100 kilowatt solar plant installation. Okay, so Dr. Dubey, I'm not sure what you are looking at, but yeah, we would like to work with you on providing any kind of financial support through DREC objects. So you can contact us specifically for those ones. Then there is a question about Vietnam. Have you done any projects in Vietnam with DREC? How is it going now? Any obstacle? So we have not started yet. And maybe Sonali, wherever you have a different view, please do pitch in, because this is generic to DREC. So we have not started a project yet, but we are actively discussing with a lot of developers in Vietnam. So you can definitely contact us, because we have a demand in Vietnam and we need more projects in Vietnam as well.
So to add to Girish's point, South Pole already has a presence in Southeast Asia, and we are doing a couple of REC projects in Vietnam. So maybe the respective person can connect with me, and I can take it up with the team in Vietnam.
Thank you, Sonali. Then Ms. Preeti Kumari is saying, is there negotiation happen between the organization that issued DREC and the organization who set up a DRE project on the pricing on per kilowatt hour energy generated for which certificate will be issued? What is the pricing in that case, and how often the certificate are issued? So Power Trust take about negotiation is that right until now, we are not specifically working on any type of negotiation. We agree on a price from our customer, and then we offer exactly the same price to our project partners or the developers. Whatever fee we earn is over and above and directly from our customer. We don't charge any fee to the project partner. So as of today, we are not negotiating any kind of pricing there. Whatever price we are getting from our customer, we are offering that to the partners. And so pricing can change from customer to customer. So I may not have a generic answer here, but just for an indication that right now, our pricing ranges between $10 per megawatt hour to $30 per megawatt hour. And the range depends upon the impact of that project on the sustainable development goals. So higher the impact and higher the pricing. On the timing, we use a quarterly billing system. So you would provide us quarterly generation. We will issue the certificates for the quarter, and then we will pay to you. Sonali, do you have alternate view, or just to add anything here?
Good to go, Girish.
Mr. Vishal, given the remoteness of many DRE projects in India and network unavailability to transmit generation data, how you ensure reliable energy connectivity? Okay, so the ideal scenario is that we get a remote monitoring or a remote monitoring connection to our platform. That's the ideal scenario, but we definitely understand that there are a lot of projects who might not have internet connectivity at all, or the internet connectivity is not regular. So that's why we have a provision to work with inverter generated CSV files or even manual data logs. In exceptional cases, we can rely on that. The only thing we require is the number of units produced on a periodical basis. So that is required, because the REC is counted as 1 megawatt hour, and to reach to 1 megawatt hour number, we need a generation data. So we can work on different type of scenario depending upon that project's issues in terms of reliable energy. Paul, if you want to pitch in anyway, just do that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, the only thing I would add there is to say that in the instance where we were relying on a CSV file export or a manual meter read, that project would more likely be subject to more stringent audit requirements than one where we're getting the real-time connection. Right? It's going to run through the same MRV platform and automated verification, but we are going to be much more rigorous in terms of doing spot checks as well as the verification upfront before we sign a contract for that kind of project. So it's something that we really only do in exceptional circumstances. The DREC platform really is built to run on an automated MRV platform where we have reliable IoT connection. But of course, we know that isn't always possible, so we're willing to consider the alternative scenario.
Sonali? Petam, question, are these DRECs applicable solely to energy generating projects? Is there any scope for integrating productive use of RE projects? If yes, could you please share an example? So yes, we have worked with solar pumps earlier. We are right now discussing with few other developers who are providing solar lighting solutions or even solar cooking solutions. The only and even also actively discussing about solar-based refrigeration. The only requirement is that there has to be a measurement device which can measure that how much electricity is being produced from the solar panels which are being used in that system. So that's our only requirement. But we are definitely open to work with any kind of productive use appliances or integration in other type of projects. But as I said, the generation numbers has to come from the device. That's our only requirement. In past, we have seen solar pumps where there is no generation data coming out, so we can't work with that because then we can't aggregate that to 1,000 kilowatt hour or 1 megawatt hour to issue one DREC specifically. So if you are doing anything, and there is generation data which can be integrated with us, then we are definitely looking to work on such things.
Yeah, just to add to your point, I mean, yes, we are obviously also working with DRE powered livelihood projects. South Pole ourselves have been approached by a lot of fisheries, poultry type projects that are using off-grid solutions in remotest of communities. So yes, we are looking at livelihood technologies.
The question from Rishikesh Mishra, who will benefit from the carbon credit, the EPC or the end user? Additionally, as the plant AMC is for 1 to 5 years with the EPC, what implication does it have? So, Rishikesh, just to comment on that, before saying that we are not carbon credits, we are RECs, while the process is very similar. But I get your point. Technically, the owner of the REC is the one who is owning that project. So whoever has put in the money to set up the project is the rightful owner. But we have seen scenarios wherein for various reasons, the owner of the project is not able to either reach out to us or converse with us, or is not capable to deal with the data and other requirement for issuing the DRECs. In those cases, the EPC can get an assignment or a right from the end user, and we need to see that document that the EPC company has that right to deal with us on the behalf of an end user, and then a EPC company can definitely deal with us, and whatever the sharing arrangement or the fee between the EPC and the end user is to be negotiated among them. But we strongly encourage that some benefit has to reach to the project definitely. So that is an important requirement. But yes, we are okay to deal with EPC companies.
Girish, can I add here, Girish? Yeah. Just our experience for the benefit of others is that in the case of CSR-sponsored projects, microgrids and other projects, the donor cannot claim the benefit of DREC because CSR is to be spent. It's a one-way spending. And hence, we build this into the contract. Sometimes it's a tri-party agreement between the donor, the user, and us. And as Girish mentioned, we explained we are transparent to the user or the beneficiary that this money from Power Trust will be used for supporting 4 or 5 years of the AMC and also the battery replacement at the end of 5 years. In the cases where the CSR is going to the microgrid villages, we enter into an agreement with the Panchayat or the village Samiti, and that is what we share with Power Trust or we explain to Power Trust. So I think this is very doable what Power Trust is expecting. Thank you.
Yeah, and Sonali, were you adding anything here?
Yes, broadly on the carbon credits front, I mean, speaking from experience, we have been approached by a lot of EPC companies that have directly installed projects in the project boundary of the end user. So yes, while the end user can also has to technically claim the credits, in some cases an EPC can also seek a no objection certificate from the end user that they can either share the revenue of the carbon credits or the carbon credit ownership can also be transferred. But that is just a case-to-case basis approach.
Mr. Vishal's question about solar and small wind DREC's different pricing. So, Vishal, as of now, we are only working for solar. So we don't have a small wind scenario right now. So there is no pricing difference because we are not working in that segment. But as I earlier mentioned, that the only difference in pricing is because of the impact on sustainable development goals within solar category right now. Dr. Dubey, what is the calculation of DREC? How many DREC with per kilowatt? I mean that's a simple calculation that how many kilowatt hour you are expecting to be generated from a specific solar project, and 1,000 kilowatt hour is 1 DREC or 1 megawatt hour. In India, just to give a simple example, in India, 1 megawatt project generally produces anywhere between 1,500 to 1,700 megawatt hour or equivalent DRECs. That's a typical calculation, but that definitely depends upon the solar radiation, what location it is on, what is the size of project. But that's a simple assumption here. India is solar plants where size may vary from lowest to I think that's a continuation of the earlier question. Can DREC be applied by EPC INC company or only by customer? I think we have already discussed that in the earlier part. How could small devices like home systems leverage DREC? Does it need to technology to monitor energy emission through panels? Yeah. So we have already covered that. Yes, that we definitely need the integration with our platform. But in exceptional circumstances where there is a specific issue about non-availability of internet or any other issue, we can consider manual readings or other type of ways to get the data. But our preferred option is to integrate with any kind of remote monitoring system. What is the document which you like to see between end user and EPC? So, Dr. Dubey, you need to send an email to me, and I'll send you the template of the document for that. Or you can send an email to me and Sonali, any one of us. Mr. Mishra, will the credit be applicable for generation and a solar generation, or only for the energy that is being used, energy to load? So technically, whatever energy is being used would only be generated. There won't be any additional generation. But as I said, that whatever is being generated and coming out of the generation data or passing through the inverter, passing through any kind of solar meter is the generation we use from the solar panels. So we will be counting that for our purposes. Dr. Dubey said that we have a document of NOC or as I said that please do send us an email and we will send you a template of that. Datta has asked, will Power Trust issue DRECs retrospectively for a microgrid that has been in operation for last 4 years? Okay, so that one is the important one, and maybe Sonali might also agree on that. So we work on a concept called additionality, and for that we are specifically working on projects which are yet to be operationalized. So you need to engage with us even before you are planning a project, and we should sign up with you before you start installation of that project. So that is the ideal case scenario. Sometimes, very rarely, some of our customer need RECs for a specific year. For example, right, if we are in 2023, they might need data from January to till today, or maybe in some of the cases for 2022 also. But we generally don't deal in vintage data. That is not what we are working on right now. Sonali, is there any different view from you?
There have been some cases where we have considered vintage data, but obviously not a year more. So 4
Yes.
years is long enough time altogether.
So the maximum both of us might have worked would have
Yeah.
the previous year, not
Exactly.
before.
Yeah.
Mr. Vishal has asked, can DREC be traded for RPO fulfillment of the obligated entities? I would say no, because for Indian RPO regulation, you have to go for the Indian REC system, which is similar, but again, it's a different instrument. You have to work with the Indian REC system. DREC is not has not got that recognition in India. Even IREC has not got that recognition in India. You have to work with the Indian authorities to get the RECs issued. The Indian RECs issued.
Yeah. And I think the ideal case is that projects should not have supplied power under any long-term PPA. And an RPO obligation should not exist in the period where RECs are to be claimed. And this is also to ensure that double accounting is not taking place.
Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Rishikesh Mishra has asked, will the project be subject to any regulation or requirement as a result of participating in carbon credit program? Are there any terms or condition or legal requirements that we need to be aware of before proceeding? Actually, I mean, not directly, but one of the answers which is linked to it is there should not be any kind of double counting here, which Sonali just mentioned. So one of the good example here is that if the project is under the net metering program in India, then there are concerns about double counting, because the distribution company is using the data, solar generation data, to satisfy their renewable purchase obligation. And if they are using that data for their RPO, then you can't get RECs issued for that type of generation here. I don't have any other specific answer to your question here, but normally we have not seen any kind of regulation or requirement being applicable if we are dealing with you to get the RECs issued. So normally we are not seeing any kind of requirement.
I see that you also, Rishikesh also addressed question regarding regulation requirement for participating in carbon credit program. So yes, Rishikesh, I mean, pertaining to all the methodologies, registries, where are gold standard, the documentation requirement varies accordingly. And obviously, as part of voluntary carbon mechanism, we have to produce PDD, project design reports, and the process of the technology for which carbon credit has to be claimed.
Last question here from N. What is the capacity range and what voltage level of RE project? So as we said, we are working on distributed project, but that definition of distributed is generally agreed between us and the customer. At Power Trust, we are using any smallest number up to 5 megawatt right now. And voltage, we don't have any preference for voltage. Most of the inverters generally push the voltage between 400 volt to 800 volt, and we are okay with that. But the range might change depending upon what customer we are dealing with. Some of them might require a lower number, some might even go a bit higher. But we are mainly working with distributed projects. So at Power Trust, it's up to 5 megawatt right now. So that finishes all the questions here. Previously, so I think we have finished with the question. It went quite early, but just checking if there is.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. I think there is a question in chat I can see from Akshay. Can many projects on grid solar of 3 to 5 kilowatt each qualify for REC?
Yes, they can qualify for RECs. Size is not a constraint, but when you say on-grid solar, please do check that they are not under any kind of net metering program. That's our only concern here.
Yeah, that's right. So I don't see any questions in chat, but any last words from all three of you?
I would just say that please do reach out to us. We already are working with few developers in India, and there is a lot of impact story there. There are projects which are providing a lot of impact on the ground, and we feel very satisfied and very happy when we work with these type of projects. So we would like to explore more. Do not consider that your project may or may not work out with us. Please do check out with us, and we may be able to jointly find a solution. Generation data and other stuff, we have been dealing with a lot of other developers, and we are definitely here to help you. I am based in Delhi. Sonali from South Pole is also based in Delhi. We are here. Paul is based in US. But then we all of us are like global teams. So please do reach out to us if you have any query, and we are excited to get more projects from the Clean Network. I think you would like to say Paul as well.
I just want to say that it's been a privilege working with Clean, and to thank everyone here for attending, and especially Raghu for sharing your experiences at EHANS. It's been fantastic to work with the Clean Network for, we've been working with various members for over a year now. So glad we were able to make this webinar happen.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, and good to be a part of the webinar and be a panelist on board for the first time. So yes, you can reach out to South Pole for any project interest, not just in DRECs, but other ESCs and carbon offsetting projects. We'd be happy to assist you in any part of the world.
Raghu, anything from you? There's some last words.
Oh, thank you, Priya. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure working with Power Trust, and actually, one of the Clean board members introduced me. Piyush introduced me to Paul because Piyush, am I right, Paul?
Correct.
They are also a portfolio of Shell Foundation. Am I right?
Yep, that's correct.
Right. So that's how I got introduced to Paul, and I think every member of Clean, I mean, from the way I have worked on projects, many projects from Clean members would qualify. I think this program was long overdue. I'm very glad that Priya and Vishal, you have been able to do this because as many people have asked very right questions, it does take some time to sink into this whole concept. But I can assure you that it's not all that difficult. I'm here to help everybody. And this is really a very useful money, and $30 is not a small amount. I mean, we entered into a power purchase agreement, and not power purchase, it's more like a OPEX model for a very prestigious project that Development Alternative is promoting in Mirzapur. Very exciting. And we were able to, it was an international tender, and we were able to win that only because we were able to lower the cost by more than 12%. And that, like Girish explained, we took the permission from them prior. And this is a very, very good thing for every Clean member. So thank you so much, Priya. Thank you so much, Clean team, for organizing this.
And thank you, Raghu. It's really special to have you here for everybody's knowledge. Raghu is not just one of the founders of Clean, but he's also the previous treasurer and a member of the founder governing board. So very happy to see you here in this first of the restart of the webinar series.
Thank you.
And as you mentioned, yes, this has been long overdue. We have been discussing this for some time. I'm particularly grateful to Rekha for pursuing all of us to make this happen. If there is more interest from Clean to get sort of dive deeper into this from Clean, for if Clean members want to do that, we can even do a follow-up session where we can work on developing a bit more understanding of what all that is required from the side of the project developers, and how the journey sort of proceeds for them. So if
Absolutely,
there,
very good idea, Priya. We can have a kind of a deep dive into it has been very challenging. Girish is a very tough guy. It has been very challenging to deal with Girish and Paul. I mean, in terms of their requirement, they don't compromise on that, but they help you guide the way through, and we have learned from that. And as someone said, metering is a challenge, because even after putting remote sensing, systems or remote monitoring systems, in many cases the device doesn't deliver the data. So we have gone through all this evolution, and I'm happy to share all that experience for the benefit of our Clean members. We can have a like a 1 hour, 1.5. I can take case by case, in the projects that we have done in Arunachal Pradesh. How did we manage? Because when they say metering evidence, they want the photograph of the inverter, which means time during those 3 months, the engineer has to travel to the site and take the photographs. All those systems we have instituted. So please feel free to reach me. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you, Raghu. So if there aren't any comments or questions, I think we can close this webinar. I just want to say one thing, that as you know, Clean has a wide variety of DRE practitioners as its members. And as I understand, and as you clearly mentioned also, that this DREC framework currently is looking at solar electricity generation and applications based on that. And as long as that electricity generation can be measured, it is eligible for DRECs. But as I think there was a question also about this, that what about, let's say, small wind or micro hydro? How can we work together to get these kind of projects also in the framework? And beyond electricity, can we also look at maybe thermal energy applications, mobility related applications? Because at Clean, we believe that a variety of approaches based on distributed or decentralized renewable energy need to be mainstream if we really want to address the climate crisis and meet the sustainable development goals and achieve equity in energy access. In order to make that happen, we need more versatile instruments to provide financing to those projects which deliver both on climate and other environmental and social and economic benefits. So from Clean side, we would be happy to work with you to help develop the modalities. I can understand that data collection would be a big challenge, especially when these are non-electricity projects. But let's see if we can find some workarounds that using information technology or other vehicles. So with that, I would. Okay, there seems a question has popped up in chat. We can take that. Manoj is asking, may we know how much old system we may register for DREC?
How much old system? Okay, so as I earlier mentioned that we prefer newly built system. There are rare circumstances when we use the generation from a vintage system, but most of the time we prefer, we go with new build system because of the concept of additionality. We want to create more projects on the ground, and that is the one of the main purpose that our customers are paying a premium on a standard IREC price. So we don't deal with old system, but then I mean, we can take that question individually, that we have sometimes we have a requirement of 1-year generation from our old system. So if Mr. Manoj can send an email to me, then we can discuss that separately. You can also check with Sonali on this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So with that, I think we can close this session. I thank Girish, Paul, and Sonali very much for sharing your wisdom with Clean members and all the participants. I was a bit apprehensive given that this webinar was happening at 9 a.m. But we had good attendance and good participation, good questions came from the audience. So very happy about that. Thank you very much to the Clean backend team, which has been, let me tell you that we are experimenting with this webinar framework for the first time in Zoom. So I'm happy that it went off pretty well. So once again, thank you very much. And hope to see you in the next webinar, which will happen in the next month. We'll share the details soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dinesh. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Girish. Thank you, Priya. Thank you, Sonali. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Raghu.